Training camp starts this week for the Miami Hurricanes. There's no doubt in my mind on what the top position battles are going to be.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Post Game on the Miami Hurricanes radio network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen, even on a Sunday. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On this loaded episode, we'll explain why Miami apparently has the second toughest non-conference schedule in the entire country and what that means for this season. Carson Beck is getting respect from teammates and coaches. Don't take my word from it, take their word from it. But let's talk position battles. So, guys, Thursday, we're 4 days away. That's when training camp opens at Miami. Organized team activities for the first time in a couple months. Yes, they've had the player run practices and they've had strength and conditioning, but this is the first official practice coming up Thursday since the end of spring ball in mid-April. So we're getting this much closer, guys. July 31st, first fall camp practice. August 31st, first game against Notre Dame. Real football is going to be here before we know it. And I'm getting a lot of questions from listeners and viewers about what I think the top position battles are going to be. Now, let me offer this disclaimer. There's going to be battles all over the place, guys, because starting jobs are not handed out. They are earned out there. So, there are obviously certain spots that are easier to handicap than others, like starting quarterback with Carson Beck. There's not a whole lot of mystery there. There's going to be competitions, but the position groups that I feel strongest about in terms of being, let's say, wide open at this point in time, receiver and defensive back. Now, about a week ago, I gave you guys my projected starting 22 for Miami, and my projected starting receivers, two outside guys, one slot, are C.J. Daniels, 6-year senior transfer from LSU, JoJo Trader, heading into his true sophomore year at Miami, and Tony Johnson at the slot. That's the transfer from Cincinnati, who's got over 100 career receptions, has played at Cincinnati and FAU, the most experience of Miami slot options. But listen, I can give you three names. Doesn't mean anything until we really see how the dog days of training camp play out, because you also have guys, even at that slot position, like Malachi Toney, who's a true freshman, but looked dynamic and appears to have like the highest ceiling in terms of the guys competing to be the starting slot. Ray Joseph, it's be his third year with the program, has had to wait behind Xavier Restrepo for the last couple of seasons. Ray works really hard, plays really hard, and the dude has the attitude of an old school Cane. He's put in his time, but now he's got to try to win that competition. And even on the outside, Nye Carr, I believe, is going to compete for playing time. Some believe that even as a true freshman, Joshua Moore, who is, 6'4", 215 plus, looks the part, made some really good contested catches in spring. There were certain days when Moore was taking over. Some believe he might be physically mature enough to start as a true freshman. Go out there and try to earn it. Chance Robinson is a name people are always asking me, how come none of you media guys are talking about Chance Robinson? He's a bit of a wild card coming off of injury. Didn't see him in spring football because he wasn't healthy, but I believe he's healthy at this point. So Chance, who's heading into his second year, same as JoJo, Chance is going to get his opportunity to compete. And, going back to spring practices, I would be very, very surprised if JoJo Trader is not a starter for this team, because that was the guy that I thought from that receiver room was most consistently from week 1 to week 6 making the most plays. Like, I really thought JoJo was the guy who stood out, and Malachi Toney really, as the game slowed down for him, started to emerge later on. CJ Daniels was banged up for the first few weeks of spring, was around for the final couple weeks, really started to emerge. So nothing set in stone there, and I think that's going to be one of the better position battles. And then it's worth noting, for what we saw from that receiver room in spring football, that was all catching passes from quarterbacks not named Carson Beck. So Beck may have a different sort of chemistry with some of these guys. Perhaps Carson Beck and Nye Carr maybe develop a deeper connection than Emory Williams and Judd Anderson and Luke Nickel did. Maybe he and CJ Daniels, I know that's a guy he's worked out a lot with over the last couple of months. Maybe the two of them develop this magical chemistry. Maybe he and Chance Robinson or he and Malachi Toney end up being on the same page. So receiver is going to be a really fun group to watch throughout spring football. DB, I look at it in a similar way. And again, one of the reasons why we talk so much about receiver is Miami lost so many guys from last year. So it's like a power vacuum that's created in that room. Defensive back, you lost some guys. Defensive back room, though, was not good last year, where the receiver room was fantastic. Defensive back room overall struggled. And, you have O.J. Frederick coming back for his true sophomore year off of a phenomenal freshman season, one of the top graded freshmen in the country. Xavier Lucas transfers into Miami from Wisconsin, another one of the top graded true freshman DBs in America last year. He's at Miami now. And Lucas, by the way, looked like the real deal in spring. Same thing with Zechariah Poyser, who transferred in from Jacksonville State to play safety at Miami. He looks like a starter at safety, but then you have to wonder, Jacoby Thomas, who we haven't watched at Miami, just transferred in the spring from Tennessee. Is he going to walk into a starting job, or are guys like Dylan Day, who had a really good spring, and Markeith Williams, who's an upperclassman now, are they going to contend for safety jobs and really contend to make that rotation deep? So those are some players to watch. Another one, I'm guilty of not talking about this player enough because he lost most of his season due to injury last year, and I think he was banged up in spring as well. But when I was having a conversation Tuesday with Mario Cristobal talking about the DBs, Cristobal went out of his way to mention Damari Brown. Damari, who, when he's been on the field, which just hasn't been often enough, he's had bad injury luck, has really looked like a big physical lockdown type of corner. We just haven't seen enough consistency for him staying on the field. He's healthy right now. He's going to get the opportunity to compete in fall camp coming up. So there's really, on both those sides of the football, from the defensive backfield to the receiver room, like there's a lot of exciting names and really good players, but a lot of young players and a lot of players who haven't done it yet at Miami. And there are other transfer defensive backs, by the way. I didn't mention names like Ethan O'Connor, Charles Brantley, who both did pretty well in spring, and Miami in April or May in the transfer portal added Keionte Scott, who, was a little bit out of position last year, 2024 at Auburn, but 2023, when he was playing at the nickel, was an all SEC selection and really good at that spot. And he reunites with Zach Etheridge, who coached him when he was at Auburn. So defensive backfield, I think, is probably going to be pound for pound the most improved part of the team this year for Miami. We just really need to see who kind of emerges at the top of that rotation. In terms of receivers, there's a lot of pressure there because last year, from Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo, of course, who was your top guy in that room last year, Isaiah Horton, who transferred to Alabama, Sam Brown had some production there. You're losing all of those guys who were lighting up your stat sheet last year. I think Miami has the talent to replace them. I think you're looking at, it's a testament to what Mario Cristobal and his staff are doing in the transfer portal and in recruiting. I believe you've got the talent to replace these guys. It's just, the ones who have put up numbers like Tony Johnson at Cincinnati and CJ Daniels at LSU and Liberty, they just haven't done it in a Miami uniform. And then for guys like JoJo Trader, who we just saw flashes of last year, Nye Carr, Chance Robinson, true freshman guys like Dalen Upshaw is another name I should mention because he had a very good spring. Malachi Toney and Joshua Moore. It's about doing it for the first time at the collegiate level. So I'm going to start there. Wide receiver, DB. Those are going to be the rooms that I'm going to be looking at as the spots where the hottest battles are taking place. I want to give you guys some more kind of pre-fall camp thoughts when we come back. Players that I'm going to be looking for on Thursday when I enter that indoor facility. And on that note, you got to start with quarterback one and what's being said about him by his coaches and teammates. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Guys, Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. The insights that they give you on Monarch are invaluable, and it's also incredibly valuable to have all of your financial information in one place. Guy, I cannot recommend this enough. As somebody who used to use like a dozen different apps to manage all of the various sectors of my credit cards and investments, having all of it in one place and the insights that come with that at Monarch are absolutely awesome. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code Locked On College at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code Locked On College for half off your first year. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. If you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, sign up below. I include the link in the show description and become a Locked On Canes insider. I'll be at fall camp or fall training camp, practice, whatever you want to call it. I'll be out there at Green Tree on Thursday, providing you guys as many insights as possible. You get one-on-one questions and answers from me, text directly from my phone to yours. Click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Become a Locked On Canes insider today. So, yeah, in terms of who I'm going to be looking for day one of training camp, my eyes tend to gravitate towards the guys I haven't seen in a Miami uniform before. You remember when I walked into the first spring practice back in March, first guy that I noticed was Josh Moore, true freshman wide receiver who looked like a junior. He's physically very mature, was making plays out there. That was someone that grabbed my attention. Hayden Lowe, another big-bodied true freshman on the defensive side. So going into training camp this time around, first guy we're all going to be looking for is Carson Beck. We saw quarterback one out there in the spring, but he wasn't cleared to throw, limited workouts and stuff. I'll play you a clip in a moment with Carson talking about kind of what he did during spring football to give you a better idea. But actually seeing him out there and kind of measuring him up against Miami's other quarterbacks, Luke Nickel, the true freshman who we're pretty excited about, Judd Anderson, Emory Williams, of course, just kind of seeing how Beck looks in drills against those other quarterbacks is going to maybe give us just a better idea of what Miami actually has on their hands here. So you'll be looking for Carson Beck. I know that one's very obvious. Mohamed Toure, linebacker Miami has added since spring football. I don't know for sure if he's going to be like completely full go with all the team activities. He might be, but he is recovering from an ACL injury from last year. I know he's been very active during off-season workouts, so I'm not exactly sure, health permitting where he's at right now, but we expect him to be full go by the time the season starts, August 31st. So maybe July 31st, he's going to be complete full go. But I'm definitely going to look for Toure. If you guys heard my conversation last week with Wes Basaint, he was singing Mo's praises on just what a live wire that dude is and what a leader he is. I mean, he's been around for a long time, 5th or 6th year guy. I think he might even be a 6th year guy now because he's lost 2 full seasons due to injury. And, Toure is really looking at this like a money year for him to try to impress the NFL. And I think Miami's got themselves a great addition at the linebacker position. Going back to those wide receivers and defensive backs, I'm going to be looking out for Keelan Marion and Tony Johnson. In fact, I don't even know if I mentioned Marion's name in the previous breakdown, and shame on me because that's another one who's going to be competing for potentially a starting job at outside receiver, if not a prominent rotational role, the transfer out of BYU. And Marion is expected to be, because of his pedigree as a returner, a special teams ace for Miami this year. This is someone who was all Big 12 last year as a kick returner, returned 2 kicks to the house. So whether we're watching special teams drills or receiver drills, Keelan Marion is going to be someone we keep an eye on, along with the aforementioned Tony Johnson, who Miami added in spring from Cincinnati. A couple of the guys in the defensive backfield that have been added after spring football. I mentioned Keionte Scott and Jacoby Thomas. Scott, who technically transferred from Houston, but never played at Houston. He was from Auburn. And Jacoby Thomas, who transferred in from Tennessee. And, Thomas, we'll see if he ends up being, and he might, a starting safety at Miami. He was actually trending to becoming a starter this year with the Tennessee Volunteers before he transferred. Will he, fulfill that dream at the University of Miami? And then Keionte Scott, is he going to stand out at the nickel spot the way a lot suspect that he will? But we'll have to see it to believe it, of course. So those are some of the guys we're going to be watching. In terms of, the drills that are most enjoyable, and, keep in mind, the media viewing is not typically an entire practice. We get to watch. We kind of pick our spots. We don't usually get to watch the 11-on-11s, the really heated stuff. So usually my favorite drills to watch are the one-on-one receiver drills, receivers going up against defensive backs with all the quarterbacks rotating, throwing them footballs. Some of the coolest battles that we saw a year ago at this time were Xavier Restrepo going up against Mish Powell in one-on-ones. They had a lot of good matchups last year. You would imagine Restrepo won his fair share of those. And I could recall a couple months ago in spring, JoJo Trader being probably the most consistent guy in the one-on-ones. So looking out for him going up against Miami's top DBs is going to be a lot of fun. So those drills tend to be enjoyable to watch. Let's talk a little bit more about Carson Beck, though. I mentioned getting respect from coaches and teammates. So another one who just spoke out about Beck, this came from an interview on the Silver State Sports Show. And I think it was Chris Stock from Inside the U who transcribed this. So good on Chris for finding this. So Elijah Lofton, who's expected to be probably Miami's tight end 1 this year. Although to keep up the competition theme, though, Alex Bauman had a good spring, the transfer tight end, and Brock Schott and Luka Gilbert, a couple of true freshmen, have been playing well. But Elijah Lofton is probably going to be your featured guy at tight end this year. Played a little bit last year. He made a meal out of the playing time he got, had a rushing touchdown, had 9 receptions for 150 yards and a receiving touchdown. Lofton can play anywhere and do anything. And this is what Lofton said about Carson Beck. On his most impressive attribute, Lofton said, breaking down a defense. He's really good at breaking down a defense and throwing the ball into windows and where the ball is supposed to be. He's a cool guy, Lofton added. He's an awesome guy, a good guy. Same as Cam. He works hard. Same way we talk about defenses, schemes. We're always talking about the season. And, another one, you guys saw the conversation that I had with Francis Mauigoa at ACC Media Days. And CeCe Mauigoa also said that, in terms of and different personalities, of course, but in terms of the leadership characteristics and the way that they approach football, CeCe also said that, Carson Beck is a lot like Cam Ward in that aspect. And CeCe legitimately, because he said this to me on the air and off the air, so this wasn't like he was putting it on for the cameras. He really believes in Beck, and he's been impressed with the way Carson has carried himself going back to January when he arrived at Miami. So I want to give you guys a couple of clips from Carson Beck at the ACC kickoff. Here is first why Beck, because people are wondering, he's getting ripped for this. You were at Georgia, you left Georgia for Miami. People are assuming that, Kirby Smart must have told him, get out, we don't want you back. That's not the way that it happened. Beck had conversations. He had an opportunity to stay at Georgia. He certainly had an opportunity to enter the NFL draft. I think he made the right decision not to, because he can raise his stock this year the way that Cam Ward did at Miami last year. I think some people assume, there must be something wrong with Beck if he's going to leave Georgia for Miami, because they're completely ignoring the context of 102nd in rushing last year was Georgia. Number 1 in the country in a stat you don't want to be number 1 in, and that's wide receivers dropping passes. The pass protection was below average last year. So listen, I know Georgia, I'm not downgrading them. It's one of the premier programs in the entire country. But in terms of the protection and the supporting cast they provided for Carson Beck last year, it wasn't good enough. And then you talk about going to Miami, not necessarily saying Miami has a better offense than Georgia, but they also play against primarily ACC defenses, and that makes a difference. So here's Carson Beck when asked why he chose the Hurricanes.
I think the biggest thing for me, obviously, was the offensive fit. As a quarterback, the OC, the scheme, the talent and guys that you're going to have around you is huge to the success and ultimately the future, of a quarterback, but of me, right? And this is my future, and I think that this decision is one of the better decisions I've made. And since I've been here in January, and developing the relationships and building the chemistry between me, the wide receivers, the running backs, the tight ends, the O-line, and just trying to develop, those relationships and that camaraderie, it's just reinforced my decision in a positive way. I'm really excited to continue to keep working with these guys. Obviously, the spring, it was a little slow for me. I try to take more of a coaching role, a coaching aspect, being behind every single play, trying to help the other quarterbacks that were in there getting reps, picking out one singular receiver at practice and watching every single one of his reps, and then going in and watching the film with him after, right, and teaching him certain things, certain intricacies and routes and concepts, and trying to teach everybody the way I see the game, right, so that we're all on the same page. But, I mean, ultimately the decision I feel like has really paid off, and this offseason has been really good and full of really good work.
So he sounds to me, and to anyone who's listening, he sounds like a cerebral quarterback, someone who's really motivated heading into this upcoming season, and someone who's got a good grasp of football. And like Mario Cristobal told me that Carson and Shannon Dawson, his new offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, have really developed a good relationship over these past several months. So I'm excited to see the way that translates into practice this upcoming Thursday, to be able to see Beck out there, no restrictions physically, fully in his element, and the way he takes command over this offense. It's exciting. And listen, and again, people are like, oh, why would he leave Georgia for Miami if he wasn't kicked out of there? Let's not forget, again, Miami had literally the number one offense in the country last year. Now, rightfully so, Cam Ward, who's already tearing it up in training camp for the Titans, by the way. Of course, Cam Ward gets a lot of credit for that. He had a monumental year. Cam Ward elevated Miami, but I also believe in certain ways Miami helped elevate Ward. The offensive line that he played behind, which is very similar to the one that Carson Beck is about to play behind, they have an opportunity to even be better this year than they were a year ago from an O-line standpoint, right? There's a reason why Ward got better at Miami compared to where he was at Washington State. Offensive line, supporting cast. I know, again, Miami's got a lot of new receivers and tight ends compared to last year, but I think that group is really well coached by Kevin Beard and Shannon Dawson, and I see a lot of positivity from Miami's young receivers. I think they maybe even have a higher ceiling than last year's group. It's just going to be about reaching that ceiling. And Miami offensive line, running game, these things should be on point to provide balance to Miami's offense. So, for those of us who actually know and who follow the program, you can understand why Beck would make a decision to come to Miami from Georgia, right? Seeing the way that Cam Ward just improved his draft stock from a third-day guy to number one overall pick, and now Carson has the opportunity to do that. So I thought that was pretty interesting, the words that Elijah Lofton said about Carson, and I wanted to give Carson his opportunity there to tell you guys why he decided to make the switch to Miami. I want to answer some more of you guys' questions from the Locked On Canes Insiders chat when we come back, including, what a win against Notre Dame would do for this team's stock. And guys, apparently, don't take my word for it, Miami's got allegedly the second hardest non-conference schedule in the country. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new Sunday episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, Game Time is the only ticket app that I use. We've all been there. You log in early and you wait forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you could save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. You're tired of scrolling endlessly to find the best deal? Game Time's Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. Folks, with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out the portal. Our friend Brian Smith does a great job on the portal podcast, talking all things NIL, recruiting, transfer portal, rinse and repeat. That's the stuff that makes college football fans excited these days. Brian covers all of it, available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right, we get this question from the 786. Which position group suffered the biggest losses in terms of player departures? Not to rehash it, we've talked about it today. Receiver and tight end, Restrepo, Jacoby George, Isaiah Horton, Sam Brown, all gone from last year. Tight end, Elijah Arroyo, Cam McCormick, Riley Williams. They're all either graduated, drafted, or transferred. Receiver and tight end. That's the bad news. The good news is, again, I think it kind of reminds you of like the old days when, Miami used to lose a bunch of really good players at a certain position group, and then the guys that replace them can be as good or better. I'll give you an example. You remember the 2001 backfield for the Hurricanes, which included the likes of Ed Reed and Phillip Buchanan. They lose all four of their primary defensive back starters, and then in 2002, you replace those guys with new full-time starters like Sean Taylor, like Antrell Roll, Maurice Sykes, who also had a really good year, Kelly Jennings. And so, listen, man, I'm not trying to compare, the 24 and 25 Canes to the 01 and the 02 Canes, but you get where I'm coming from. That, if you are recruiting and portaling at such a high level and you're able to replace really productive rooms with players who have a chance to be as good or better, that's the situation from a talent stacking standpoint that Miami has put themselves in. So even if you lost a ton of good players from those rooms, you have an opportunity to replace these guys. Because some of the other position groups, quarterback, Cam Ward, just for who he is and what he did last year, is a big loss. But I think Carson Beck can be a much better replacement than these national hacks would lead you to believe. Because, Carson Beck a year ago, everybody's pick for Heisman Trophy, number one overall pick for a lot of people. Coming out of last year, he's chopped liver for some reason. He's motivated. I think he's going to do really good things here. The offensive line, who hardly lost anybody you did lose your starting center from last year and your starting left tackle, but with Markel Bell having played so many games when Jalen Rivers was injured, I believe Markel could be as good, potentially even better this year. So the offensive line looks great, possibly better from last year. The running back room has a chance to be as good, if not better, even after losing Damian Martinez. Defensive line had, minor losses, but they returned Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, Ahmad Moten, Justin Scott coming up. There's a lot of young talent to rotate, especially at the edge. Linebacker, you lost Kiko Maui-Noa, but that was really the only notable loss. Miami retained some talent. You bring in guys like Kamal Bonner and Mohamed Toure. And the defensive secondary, you brought in a ton of good players. It can only be better than it was last year. I'll leave it at that. All right, we get this question from the 954 who says, hey, Donno, is it wrong to believe that if Miami has a great season, beats Notre Dame, beats Florida, and everyone else we're supposed to beat, it may be likely we flip a big name or two in recruiting? Your mouth to God's ears, 954. I think it's a little tougher to flip big-time players these days because they get, locked into some of these NIL promises and revenue-sharing deals, but flips are still a reality, and they will absolutely be a reality between now and National Signing Day in late December. So, listen, I remember how hot Miami was, 8 years ago. Man, I feel old. When they beat Notre Dame at Hard Rock Stadium, if you can create a similar buzz and then you beat Florida again, whose, stock is pretty high heading into this year, then listen, a lot of players Miami is after. Like they're not going to stop recruiting Derek Cooper. They haven't stopped recruiting Tristan Keys. They haven't stopped recruiting James Johnson. Some of the top, 4 or 5-star blue chip guys that are committed elsewhere. Miami's not going to give up on these players. You go out there, you light it up this year. You beat Notre Dame, you beat Florida, you get to the ACC championship game. Flips are an absolute possibility, if not an inevitability. Oh, man. All right, so let me get to this is not a mailbag question. Actually, I'm going to steal this, and I don't think they'll mind because I'll credit them for this. But Caneville, Streeter and X and company, Caneville put this out on the X app. It's a pretty good question. They say, if NIL existed in 2001, which Miami Hurricane would have made the most money? That's future NFL studs, Pro Bowlers, Pro Football Hall of Famers. What my gut told me when I first saw their question, which 2001 Cane would have had the biggest NIL deal? Ed Reed was what my gut told me, right? I mean, first of all, interceptions, pick sixes, almost every game. He had the personality, inspirational, tremendous locker room guy, one of the spokesmen of that 2001 team. I mean, actions and words were very loud for Ed Reed. That was what my gut told me, that Ed Reed would be the guy, the Hall of Famer. But then you think of Clinton Portis, Jeremy Shockey run that team, Bryant McKinney. I know offensive line may not be the most marketable position. And I'm not for, Andre Johnson was a big part of that team, playing a glamour position of wide receiver. I'm going to give Ken Dorsey some love as well. I know he wasn't like, a stud in the NFL, was like a good, solid backup quarterback in the NFL. But, Dorsey was one of the most successful college quarterbacks of his generation, all the winning that he did. And he had some personality too. I mean, you talk about the starting quarterback of the greatest team potentially that ever played the game. I mean, I'm sure Dorsey would have had some NIL money as well. So you guys let me know what you think. Again, my answer was Ed Reed, and that's not even Jonathan Vilma, DJ Williams, Vince Wilfork were on that team. It was a studded cast, but Ed Reed was the name that popped into my mind. Let me know if you guys agree to my answer to that Caneville question. All right, so you look at non-conference this year. Now I'm happy about this, that On3 Sports has put out their ranking, and they actually have Miami second behind Baylor as the toughest non-conference schedule in the country. And I love that because, again, when you're in the ACC, your actual conference schedule is not as spicy and high profile as the one that SEC teams and Big Ten teams play. It's gotten to the point where SEC and Big Ten teams are actually trying to schedule easier non-conference games. Like, they're kind of gravitating away from that. But when you're in the ACC and the Big 12, you need to have splashy non-conference schedules. That's just the nature of the beast. And I love the fact that with the way Miami's been scheduling, they're running towards competition, not running away from it. And, in having Notre Dame and Florida especially, but On3 points out that USF, who Miami did beat on the road last year, you've got the second end of that home and home. That's not a pushover team, and they got their quarterback Byron Brown back. And if you guys remember, like, USF hung with Miami for a bit before Miami pulled away in the second half. Like, USF made that game interesting and difficult early. It also helped that they had it was a Martin Grammatica's kid who was like making like 70-yard field goals against us. Like, what are we supposed to do? This kid can't miss. So you kind of throw that one in there. I think the other non-con game is, Bethune-Cookman, which is obviously not a difficult one, but between Notre Dame, Florida, and USF being like a low key could be a tough game. Miami's non-conference schedule is getting respected as one of the tougher ones out there. And I love the opportunities, national TV games, most of these, and, a chance to really, make an impression on folks before you even play your ACC slate. I'm happy about it. I'm happy they're getting the love for that. All right. I know I got a bunch more questions from Locked On Canes insiders I haven't had a chance to answer yet. This tends to happen. I'm very long-winded with my answers. We'll try to answer more this week. By the way, Monday, tomorrow, Larry Bluestein is going to join us. Our boy Blue is going to sit down with me here on Locked On Canes to talk a little bit about the roster and the expectations as the countdown keeps going, my friends. We're 4 days away from training camp. We are, I think, 35 days away from the Notre Dame game. It's either 35 or 34. Don't ask me to do math. It's very problematic, but something like that. We're a little over a month away from Notre Dame. We're under a week away from training camp opening up. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. Become a Locked On Canes insider. And we'll talk to you all again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.